Hey friends, has God ever called you to do something that required stepping out in faith before you knew exactly what was going to happen? My husband and I have had times when God called us to trust Him with major decisions. Once, when we believed that God had a certain house for us, we purchased it before we had sold our old house. Another time, God called my husband to retire from his longtime teaching position before he even had an interview at the school he hoped to teach at. In each of these situations, we had strong confirmation from God, but it still required a step of faith because we didn't know for sure how it would turn out. And God was faithful, and we saw His provision through our obedience to Him. In our walk of faith, we continue to encounter times that God asks us to step out in faith when we don't see how it will all turn out. In Joshua 3, the Israelites needed to cross the Jordan River so that they could enter the promised land to possess it. Through God's instructions, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, which was the place of God's presence, into the Jordan River while the water was still flowing. In fact, the river was at flood stage at that time. It wasn't until they stepped into the river that the water backed up. The priests stood in the middle of the river with the Ark of the Covenant until all the people had crossed to the other side on dry ground. Another biblical example of people stepping out in obedience is found in Luke 17:12-14. As he entered a village there, 10 lepers stood at a distance, crying out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." He looked at them and said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed of their leprosy. The lepers were healed as they went. They stepped out in obedience to Jesus' command before they received their miracle of healing. In another example, Hebrews 11:8 says, "It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going." Faith means stepping out on the promises of God even before we can see it or understand it. That's what faith is. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So faith is substance and it's evidence of what we can't see that God is calling us to believe and trust Him for. If we can see the outcome, we don't need faith. We only need faith for what we can't see. If we wait until we see it or understand it, we'll never step out in faith, and we'll miss out on the blessing and miracle that God has for us. Let's be people of faith and obedience. When God puts something on your heart that requires a step of faith, seek Him for confirmation. Share what you believe God is saying with a trusted mentor, asking them for counsel and to pray for you. And when you are confident that God has spoken, take the step of faith, keeping your eyes on Him and watch Him work and move in your life.